They say weddings are supposed to mark a new beginning, but mine felt more like a funeral, an attempt to bury a past I never had the courage to face. My name is Kenechukwu Maduka. People in Lagos know me as a real estate mogul, a polished face behind a billionaire empire. But behind the suits and the headlines is a man who built his success on silence, on control, on avoiding anything that made him feel human. I thought I was doing the right thing, moving forward, upgrading, aligning myself with the perfect woman from the perfect family. Until I saw her, Amara, my ex-wife, the woman I failed. The woman I once loved in ways I didn't understand until it was too late. She wasn't a guest at my wedding. She was wiping tables. 8 months pregnant. And in that moment, under chandeliers, surrounded by wealth and whispers, I realized I had never truly left her. I had only abandoned the truth. This is the story of what happened after I walked out of my own wedding, of the ghosts that returned, of the child that might be mine, of the woman I tried to forget, and the man I had to become to deserve her again. Welcome to Luxurious Echoes. Make sure you like and subscribe. Let's get into the story. The morning of my wedding felt like standing in the eye of a storm, eerily calm, but too still, like Lagos holding its breath. I was surrounded by motion, stylists buzzing, phones ringing, groomsmen laughing too loud as they adjusted my gbada in front of a full-length mirror in a suite at the Azure Towers in Ikoyi. The sun poured in through tinted windows, warming the crisp white walls, but inside, my chest stayed cold. My mother had everything timed to perfection, from a makeup artist's arrival to the flute of champagne I was supposed to sip for the photos. But nobody noticed the way I kept adjusting my wristwatch even when it wasn't moving. I kept telling myself it was just nerves. Every man panics before his wedding, right? But deep inside, it wasn't fear of the future that gripped me. It was the weight of the past, the one name I hadn't said out loud in years, Amara. I had trained myself not to think about her. She had become a shadow, a lesson, an emotional debt I'd filed away. This day was supposed to prove that I'd moved on. A celebration, a new chapter. But no matter how loud the music played in my head, I couldn't drown out the quiet. My mother, Chief Mrs. Maduka, walked in like royalty, wearing a gold lace iro and buba that sparkled with quiet authority. She kissed my cheek and adjusted my collar with a smile that was more performance than affection. "Today is history in the making, Kenechukwu," she whispered, like she was crowning me king. Her words sounded like prophecy and warning at the same time. My fiancée, Tamoa Adiemi, was a perfect bride by every Lagos standard. Daughter of an oil magnate, Harvard-educated, poised, scandal-free, and stunning in a calculated way. I liked her well enough, maybe even cared for her, but I couldn't lie to myself. Love wasn't what brought us together. Alignment did. Image. Stability. A mother's approval. A powerful merger. Our pre-wedding photos had trended for weeks. Tamoa in wine and gold, me in velvet black, both of us styled to resemble Lagos royalty. But in the hours before the vows, I felt like a groom preparing for war, not joy. As the car doors opened and we drove to the reception venue in Lekki, I stared out at the palm-lined roads and asked myself for the first time, what exactly are you marrying into, Ken? And what are you leaving behind? Amara entered my life quietly, the way light filters into a dark room, soft, sure, unnoticed until you realize everything looks different. We met 7 years ago at a property development seminar in Ikeja. I was still hustling then, no entourage, no chauffeur, just me and a folder of half-baked proposals. Amara was handling logistics for the event, wearing a simple Ankara blouse and jeans, balancing a laptop on one arm and fielding 10 calls like it was nothing. She had this self-contained grace, like someone who'd learned to carry her own world. When we talked, it wasn't instant fireworks. It was calm. I told her about my dreams. She told me about her mother, her job at a struggling NGO, her desire to one day start a small media outfit. She saw me, really saw me, long before the private jets and business headlines. Back when I was borrowing data. Back when I still believed sincerity was strength. Our love didn't explode. It expanded, gradually, gently. until it wrapped around both of us like a home. I married her in a small court wedding in Yaba with just 10 people in attendance and a cake from ShopRite. And for a while that was enough. But Lagos is not kind to soft beginnings. The more I rose, the more people asked, who is she? And the more my mother narrowed her eyes. She's not from our world, she'd say, sipping Zobo like it was poison. I defended Amara, but not always loud enough. As pressure built, society dinners, expectations to upgrade, the creeping silence in rooms we used to laugh in, I began to change. I buried myself in work. I traveled more. I called less. Amara lost her job during a company downsizing, and when she asked for time, asked me not to make her beg for comfort in her own home. I didn't meet her there. I saw her pain as complaining. I wore my success like a shield and let my mother's whispers become my thoughts. Then came the pregnancy scare. She was late. We were terrified and thrilled all at once. But the test came back negative, and instead of relief, we fought like strangers. Accusations flew. You would have left me anyway, she said. You never really wanted to stay. And maybe she was right. When the divorce came, it wasn't a scene. No plates were broken. Just a cold document and her voice saying, you don't have to explain. I understand. And then, just like that, she was gone. Tamawa Adeyemi wasn't just my fiancé. She was the strategic decision I made to fix a PR gap in my life. After the divorce, my mother had said it plainly. You need a woman who fits where you're going, not where you've been. Tamawa fit. Her father was a board member on 2 oil companies. Her mother ran a luxury events brand. And her Instagram was a clean gallery of class, travel, and philanthropy. We were introduced at a fundraiser for child literacy in Victoria Island, and by the 3rd date, she'd already met my mother. She didn't just blend into my world, she enhanced it. With Tamawa, I didn't have to explain myself. She understood power, how to wear it, how to preserve it. She never raised her voice, never asked questions that sounded like judgment, and always looked like a headline waiting to happen. We attended gala nights, whispered future property ventures in Uyo and Accra, and planned a wedding that would be on the cover of the Glitz. But the deeper we planned, the less I felt like a groom, and the more I felt like a project manager overseeing a luxury merger. It wasn't that I didn't like Tommy. I respected her, admired her intelligence, her ambition, her quiet elegance. But she didn't know who I was when I had nothing, and I didn't want her to. Our love wasn't built on memory. It was built on projection. She saw who I was now, the CEO, the magazine profile, the man who'd conquered Lagos. And I allowed her to stay in that version of me. We never spoke about Amara. I never told her the full story. I figured she didn't need to carry that weight, and I didn't want to explain why it still haunted me. With Tommy, everything had a polished script. Dates at RSVP, shopping trips in Santon, pre-wedding spa days in Mauritius. My mother loved her, of course she did. She called her the rebirth of our family image. It should have been enough. It was supposed to be. But I noticed the emptiness most in quiet moments, when Tommy fell asleep during late-night calls, when she looked at me like a business plan, not a person. And worst of all, when I looked in the mirror and realized I didn't miss her when she left the room. I missed who I used to be before the rooms got this cold. The reception venue was the definition of opulence. Pearl white walls, mirrored centerpieces, imported chandeliers, and enough gold leaf on the tables to blind a camera flash. Tommy's mother had hired the best wedding planner in Lagos, and they didn't hold back. The hall smelled of roses, eucalyptus, and wealth. Guests arrived in Aso Ebi, so rich it could pay rent for a year. Influencers hovered near the Champagne Tower. My friends from 6 clapped me on the back and called me lucky bastard and big fish. But I kept adjusting my cufflinks like I couldn't breathe right. My groomsmen teased me, cold feet Ken, but they didn't understand. The air felt off. I chalked it up to stress. It wasn't until I stepped into the main hall for final soundcheck and caught the faint smell of bleach, cheap soap, and floor polish that something deeper began to shift in my gut. A woman in overalls was wiping a wine glass near the stage, back turned, moving fast, trying to be invisible. Something about the way she moved caught me, too graceful for this chaos. Then she turned. and everything inside me cracked. My heart stuttered. My vision tunneled. Amara. She was thinner than I remembered. Older, but not faded. Her skin still glowed with that quiet defiance. Her hair tied in a scarf. And her belly, round, full, unmistakably pregnant. She froze when she saw me. The glass in her hand didn't drop, but her fingers trembled just enough. Our eyes locked for what felt like an hour. She blinked first. I blinked second. The noise of the venue faded behind the roar in my ears. I took one step toward her. She took one step back. My brain scrambled for logic. Was this a mistake? Was it really her? Was the child mine? Could it be? I didn't care about the cameras or the stares. I moved faster. Amara, I whispered, almost like I was afraid she'd disappear. But she didn't disappear. She just looked at me like a storm held behind her eyes, and in that moment, I knew this wasn't coincidence. This wasn't fate. This was the ghost I tried to bury. Walking straight through my wedding like she'd never left. I didn't plan to confront her in front of everyone, but my feet betrayed me. I followed her as she moved quickly toward the staff hallway, her back tense, her steps deliberate. People kept calling my name, ushers, coordinators, even the MC preparing to announce our grand entrance, but I couldn't answer. I caught up with her by the service door. "You shouldn't be here," I said, but it came out broken. She didn't turn around. "I'm working," she replied, her voice tired but not weak. "That's all." I stepped in front of her. The baby bump between us made the air feel heavier. "Is it mine?" I asked, the question burning through my throat. Her eyes didn't flinch, but they didn't soften either. "That's not a question you get to ask like this, Ken." Her words sliced through my chest. I wanted to say I was sorry, to ask where she'd been, to say I never stopped wondering, but nothing came out right. She tried to walk past me, but I couldn't move. I just stared, the weight of 1,000 unsaid things building between us like heat before rainfall. She didn't owe me anything, not a glance, not an explanation, not even her silence. But something in her pause told me she still saw me, not as a groom or a CEO, just me. "You think showing up in a uniform at my wedding was some kind of message?" I asked, more defensively than I meant. She laughed, but it wasn't warm. "You think I planned to see you again while scrubbing wine off your guest mess? Get over yourself." Her voice carried all the years of hurt I never stayed to heal. That was when I noticed the other staff peeking, trying not to interrupt. The gossip would start soon. I didn't care. I needed answers. "Why didn't you tell me you were pregnant?" I pushed again. This time, her silence was louder than any reply. She looked me in the eye and said, "Because you wouldn't have heard me. You never really listened, not then, not now." And with that, she walked away, leaving me standing between a fantasy I'd built and the truth I tried to outrun. My wedding wasn't just unraveling. It was waking me up. She didn't want to talk, not in the hallway, not under the chandeliers glittering like judgment, and certainly not in a corner where staff pushed trays of small chops and drinks past us. But I couldn't help myself. I stepped in front of her, blocking her path, my voice low and trembling. "Amara," I said again, as if the name alone could undo the years between us. She looked up slowly, her gaze calm but layered with exhaustion, defiance, and something I couldn't name. Her eyes still had that fierce silence I remembered, the one that dared people to see her beyond her status. "Please, can we talk?" I asked. "Just for a moment." She sighed, glancing past me like she was calculating every possible consequence of this conversation. "There's nothing to talk about," she said. "You're getting married. I'm working. End of story." But it wasn't the end, and we both knew it. "Are you? Is the baby mine?" I forced the question out, raw and shaky. Her lips parted in surprise, then pressed together like a door slamming shut. "Not here," she muttered. "This is not your moment to claim anything." Then she stepped around me like I was nothing more than an inconvenience. I followed her to the back hallway, where staff moved in and out of the kitchen. The air smelled of frying oil and perfume, an awkward blend of luxury and labor. We stood behind a curtain meant to hide the logistics of glamour. her hands folded over her stomach, protective and steady. "I didn't know you'd be here," she said quietly, as if trying to soften the blow. "I took a cleaning gig through a contract agency. They didn't list the name." I walked in and saw the signboard. I almost turned around. I swallowed hard. "Why didn't you?" Her response was immediate. "Because I need the money. I didn't come here to haunt you, Ken. I came to earn my pay." Her voice cracked slightly, but she blinked the emotion away. "And the baby?" I asked again. She hesitated. "Not everything is about you," she replied. "You think just because you see a woman from your past with a swollen belly, the story writes itself?" Her words stung, because they were true. I had made this about me. About guilt. About power. "I just want the truth," I said, my voice softer now. "I don't want to fight." She looked me dead in the eye. "Then stop chasing answers like you're owed them." I should have walked away. I should have let her finish her shift and disappeared back into the chaos of the wedding. But Lagos doesn't let ghosts go quietly, and my mother, especially, has a nose for unrest. The moment I re-entered the main hall, flanked by half-finished flower arrangements and gossiping waiters, my mother's eyes locked on mine. She moved like a queen in a war film, her gelly already tilted like a crown of suspicion. "Where have you been?" she asked, her voice sharp behind a fake smile meant for the cameras. "We've been waiting to make the grand entrance." I opened my mouth, but she didn't wait for an answer. "Who were you talking to?" she asked, already knowing. "I saw you with her." Her lips twisted around the word like it tasted sour. "Amara." I didn't deny it. What would be the point? "She's working here, apparently." "She didn't know it was our wedding," I muttered. My mother narrowed her eyes. "That's what she told you?" "Please." That girl was always clever at appearing humble. Her voice dropped lower. "She's pregnant, isn't she?" I hesitated. That pause was enough for her to snatch a thread of scandal and begin weaving a full tapestry of disgrace. "You cannot let her disrupt today," she hissed, gripping my arm with a firmness that surprised even me. "This is our family's reputation at stake. Do you understand?" Her words hit a pressure point I thought I'd buried. The same pressure that made me sign the divorce papers in silence, that taught me to prioritize optics over truth. "She's not disrupting anything," I said, though I wasn't sure I believed it. My mother's face shifted into something colder. "If she stays, people will talk. If they suspect you're the father, this wedding, this alliance, everything we've built, it crumbles. Do you want that?" I didn't respond, because for the first time, I wasn't sure what I wanted. I wasn't sure if I wanted this wedding, this alliance, this version of myself I had polished for society. My mother read my hesitation and took it as weakness. "Handle it," she snapped. "Now." Then she turned and walked back into the crowd, her face reassembled into a socialite smile, waving to dignitaries like she hadn't just ordered a woman out of her son's conscience. I looked around, suddenly aware of every camera lens, every whisper. The ghosts weren't just inside me anymore. They were circling the reception like vultures. Tamawa may have been raised in mansions and molded in etiquette schools, but she wasn't naive. She noticed my distance the moment I re-entered the bridal-holding suite. Her posture remained perfect. Her fingers curled gently around a glass of water, her lipstick untouched, but her eyes were sharp, watching me the way a strategist observes a chessboard. "You've been gone a while," she said, her voice even. "Is everything okay?" I nodded too quickly. "Yeah, just some confusion with the planner. Nothing serious." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "You're sweating." I looked down at my palms, which were damp. "Hot lights," I said weakly. Silence stretched between us. The kind that isn't empty, but loaded with things neither party wants to say first. She set the glass down. "Who is she?" That caught me off guard. "Who?" I asked, though I knew exactly who she meant. "The woman you followed into the hallway," she replied. No accusation in her tone, just a quiet readiness to hear whatever story I had rehearsed. Except I didn't have one. Only fragments. Ghosts. Regret. I told her the truth, but not all of it. "Her name is Amara. She's someone I used to know. From before." Tommy's face didn't flinch. "The ex-wife." I froze. How did you? She gave a small shrug. Legos talks. Your mother swore you were over it, but I figured someone who never talks about his past is hiding something too important. I sat down across from her, feeling exposed. She's working at the venue. She didn't know this was our wedding. It was an accident. Tommy nodded slowly. And the pregnancy? That question hit harder than expected. I don't know, I admitted. I asked. She wouldn't answer. Tommy inhaled deeply, then looked at me, truly looked at me. Ken, do you want to marry me today? I didn't know how to answer that. I should have said yes. That was the script. But I stared at her, a woman who deserved better than my uncertainty, and my silence said enough. She blinked once, then smoothed her dress. We have 10 minutes before the MC announces us. You have 10 minutes to decide who you want to be standing next to when that door opens. Then she stood and left me alone with a choice I should have made years ago. The sound of murmurs is different from the sound of celebration. It's sharper, hungrier. The whispers started in the far corners of the reception hall, tiny pockets of conversation that grew into ripples of speculation. By the time I stepped out into the spotlight with Tommy by my side, the air had shifted. People weren't clapping with joy anymore. They were clapping to distract from their curiosity. Phones were out. Faces wore performative smiles. One of Tommy's cousins leaned over to whisper something, and I saw her expression flicker with irritation. The DJ lowered the music for speeches, but nobody was listening. They were watching me, watching her, the woman in the Navy uniform now standing rigid near the drink station, refusing to look our way. I shouldn't have brought her into this chaos. I should have let her leave. But something in me wanted to keep her visible, to prove, to myself, maybe, that I hadn't imagined her. I was waiting for the room to explode, and Lagos never disappoints. It happened when one of the older guests, Tommy's uncle, I think, leaned into his microphone and said with a chuckle, "We almost thought our dear groom had stage fright earlier. We saw him having a long discussion with one of the cleaners. Must have been a last-minute pep talk, eh?" The room broke into polite laughter. I froze. So did Tommy. And across the hall, Amara turned her head sharply, lips pressed in fury. My mother's face turned to stone. That joke, innocent on the surface, ripped the facade apart. The murmurs intensified. Some guests looked toward Amara, others toward Tommy, waiting for her reaction. I felt the heat rise up my neck. My fingers twitched. Everything I tried to hold together was now dangling from a single thread. In that moment, I realized I had no idea how to keep these two worlds from colliding. And the thing that scared me the most wasn't the whispers or the consequences. It was how quiet Amara looked, even while standing in a room ready to consume her. That silence wasn't fear. It was dignity. And it made me feel like the smallest man in the building. I stood beside Tommy, hand in hers, my feet rooted to the marble floor like they belonged to someone else. The MC called for our first dance, the lights dimmed, and the spotlight swiveled toward the center of the room. The crowd hushed, glasses clinked, the music queued up, a soft ballad meant to wrap us in romance. But my heart was pounding against my ribs like it was trying to escape. Tommy leaned in. "Whatever you're going to do," she whispered, "do it now." And just like that, the decision stopped being about guilt or courage or timing. It became a matter of breathing. I let go of her hand, walked into the center of the spotlight, and said the words that burned through the room like a match to kerosene. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, voice cracking, "I'm very sorry, but this wedding is not happening." For a split second, nobody reacted. And then everything happened at once. The gasps, the shrieks, the stunned silence. Someone dropped a glass. My mother stood, fury blazing in her eyes, her mouth opening in slow horror. Tommy stepped back, tears already gathering, but her posture proud and unyielding. Phones were out again, recording, tweeting, destroying me in real time. I continued, not knowing what I was even saying. There are things I need to resolve before I can stand here honestly. This is no one's fault but mine, and I can't keep pretending. I didn't name Amara. I didn't mention the pregnancy. I didn't throw her to the wolves. I just looked around, found her eyes across the hall, and nodded, just once. Then I walked out, the music still playing behind me. The sound of my own life unraveling, echoing against the stone walls of the wedding I was never meant to survive. I walked into the night air of Lekki, alone for the first time in years, and finally free of the lie. But I didn't feel triumphant. I felt terrified. Because the real truth, the one I'd been running from, was just beginning. I don't remember how long I stood outside the reception hall after calling everything off. The night air in Lekki felt like cold water thrown over fire I'd let burn too long. I was still in my wedding agbada, still sweating under the weight of fabric and shame. Everyone was scrambling inside, guests demanding answers, the planner on the verge of collapse, my mother already trying to control the narrative. But all I could think about was Amara. I went back inside, ignoring the stares, and scanned the venue until I spotted her, already halfway out the side exit, her uniform folded over her arm, her head held high. She wasn't hiding. She wasn't crying. She was walking away like she always did, with dignity no one ever managed to strip from her. I followed past the buffet, past the murmuring staff, until we reached the parking lot behind the hall. "Amara, wait," I called. She stopped but didn't turn. "I need to explain," I started, but she shook her head. "You don't owe me explanations," she said. "You owed me honesty years ago. Now you owe that to yourself." I stepped closer, careful, like approaching something that had already learned to burn and rebuild itself without me. "You think I planned this?" she asked, gesturing around her. "You think I wanted to be the girl your guests whispered about while sipping imported wine?" Her voice stayed low, but every word hit like stone. "I was here to work. That's it. Until Lagos reminded me who I used to be. And who I'll never be again." I didn't try to argue. What could I say? That I missed her? That I hated how I let her become a footnote in my carefully curated life? She turned to leave, but I blocked her path gently. "Are you okay?" I asked. "Financially, medically, emotionally." She raised an eyebrow. "Don't start caring just because you ruined your perfect day." I wanted to be offended, but I couldn't. She was right. Still, before she could walk away again, I said it, not as a plea, but as a truth that had waited too long to surface. "I'm not chasing you to fix my wedding, Amara. I'm chasing you because I need to know the truth." She met my gaze, exhausted but unmoved. "Then stop following me like you're the victim in this story. If you want truth, earn it." The next time I saw her, it wasn't dramatic. No lightning strikes. No shouting. Just the quiet hum of Lagos traffic outside a small cafe in Surulere, where I'd begged her to meet me. She came late, deliberately, I think, and sat across from me like a woman sitting across from a chapter she refused to reread. She wore a faded gray dress, her scarf wrapped low, her belly a gentle curve now impossible to ignore. 10 minutes, she said. "Use them wisely." I nodded. "I'm not here to force answers," I began. "I just want to understand where things went wrong. With us. With everything." She exhaled like she'd been holding that breath for years. "You already know," she said simply. "You just don't want to admit it." And then, over 2 cups of barely touched tea, she told me what I'd never asked her after the divorce. About how she had to move out of our apartment in silence. About the NGO job that ghosted her after her name became too public. About how she pawned her wedding ring not out of bitterness, but survival. And about how she kept waiting for a call that never came. One that would say, "I'm sorry. I was wrong. Come home." "I wasn't asking for luxury," she said, her voice low. "I was asking for space. To feel like your wife, not your employee." I listened, my throat tightening with every word. I had always believed my silence was strength, that keeping my head down and moving forward was maturity. But in that moment, I realized silence could also be cruelty, especially when offered to someone who once fought beside you. She told me she only took the cleaning gig because a friend from church said the agency paid well, and she was desperate to gather money for her upcoming hospital visits. "The baby wasn't planned," she added, "but it's mine. And I'm keeping it. With or without you." There was no drama in her tone, just resolve. I wanted to offer her money, but I knew better than to insult her like that. Let me help, I said instead. Not as guilt. As responsibility. She looked at me then, not with love, not even with anger, but with something close to mercy. You don't get to choose when you start caring, she replied. But, if you really mean it, don't disappear again. Don't come back only when your world collapses. And just like that, our 10 minutes stretched into something fragile and new. 2 days after the wedding debacle, the Adeyemi family sent a formal letter through their legal team. It was written in the cold, professional language of contracts and clauses, demanding reimbursement for damages, reputational harm, and emotional distress. A 7-figure number was typed in bold. My lawyer called me the moment he saw it. They're serious, he said. And they'll go public if you don't respond swiftly. My mother was already in meltdown mode, sitting in our Banana Island living room in head-to-toe white lace like she was mourning a burial. You've shamed this family, she spat. Do you know how long it took us to be taken seriously again after your first marriage? Do you think this city forgives twice? I said nothing, just stared at the letter while the walls closed in. This wasn't about love anymore, it was about power, alliances, status. I was never just getting married. I was signing a business treaty. Tommy hadn't reached out, and I didn't blame her. I destroyed her carefully constructed world with one sentence. Still, the silence was brutal. I met with her father at Eco Hotel. A quiet, tense meeting over untouched pastries and expensive silence. You embarrassed my daughter, he said without raising his voice. You embarrassed my name. I apologized. I didn't try to justify myself. I told him it was never Tommy's fault. That she deserved better than a man who wasn't ready. That I should have been honest earlier. He didn't flinch. I don't care about your soul searching, he replied. I care about damage control. This is Lagos. Perception is everything. We parted on civil terms, but I knew the war wasn't over. That night, a gossip blog leaked clips from the wedding. The moment I walked off stage, the MC's confusion, even blurry shots of Amara near the service door. My phone didn't stop buzzing. Headlines screamed betrayal. Friends distanced themselves quietly. Investors paused. Deals froze. All because I told the truth too late. I sat alone in my apartment, listening to Lagos laugh through my speakers, and for the first time in a long time, I asked myself, who am I without applause? The answer wasn't comforting, but it was real. Amara agreed to see me again, this time at a private clinic in Yaba, where she was scheduled for a prenatal checkup. She didn't invite me, I just offered to drive her when I found out. She looked at me warily when I showed up. This isn't about playing father, she warned. I don't need someone holding my hand for photos. I nodded. I just want to understand what's going on. The clinic was modest, nothing like the glossy private hospitals I was used to, but the staff was kind, and the waiting room smelled of antiseptic and ginger tea. As she sat with her hands resting over her belly, I noticed how much smaller her world had become. No entourage. No stylists. Just resilience. After her vitals were checked, the doctor walked us through a complicated medical timeline. She'd had a series of complications from stress, a brief hospitalization, and a hormonal imbalance that made early testing unreliable. That explained why she hadn't known she was pregnant right away, and why she'd been so guarded when I asked. It wasn't secret, she said quietly. It was survival, and I wasn't sure if the baby would even make it. I sat in silence, letting her words sink in. Survival. That word again. It followed Amara like a shadow through marriage, divorce, and now pregnancy. It wasn't that she didn't trust me entirely. It was that she didn't trust the version of me that left her in silence, who signed documents without asking if she was okay, who chose comfort over clarity. I'm sorry, I said, and for once I wasn't performing. She gave me a tired glance. It's not about sorry, Ken. It's about now. Are you capable of being here without trying to fix everything on your own terms? I didn't have an answer, but I sat beside her through the appointment, listened to the heartbeat, watched the grainy black and white screen flicker with life. And something shifted in me. Not possession, not panic, just humility. After the appointment, she declined my offer to drive her home. I'm used to taking Kiki, she said. It's not the end of the world. I watched her walk away in the same navy flats she used to wear to our old compound, and it hit me hard. This woman was building a future with or without me. The least I could do was stop getting in the way. She didn't invite me to her apartment. I just showed up outside weeks later, carrying a brown bag of groceries and no real excuse. She opened the door in a long Ankara skirt and an oversized tee that used to be mine, something I hadn't even realized I left behind. Her flat was small. One bedroom, faint smell of disinfectant, fan humming in the background. No generator hum, no house help. Just Amara, a chipped coffee table, and walls covered with sticky notes of baby checklists. "I don't need charity," she said immediately. "I'm not here to fix your guilt." "I'm not here to offer anything," I replied. "I just want to see where you live, where you sleep, where this baby might take their first breath." She let me in, reluctantly, and sat on the arm of a sofa that had clearly survived more than it was built for. I looked around, not to judge, but to understand. This wasn't the world I built for her when we were married. This was the one she built after I abandoned her. And somehow, it still had more strength than all the glass towers in Banana Island. I sat down across from her, trying not to look out of place. The silence wasn't awkward, it was honest. "You know," she said after a while, "when I first moved here, I hated this place. It felt like failure, like a punishment. But then, I realized I could breathe." She paused, touching her belly. "Nobody polices my choices here. Nobody tries to mold me. It's just me. And this child. Figuring it out." I nodded, unsure of what to say. For the first time in our history, I wasn't the provider. I wasn't the rescuer. I was the observer. "Do you want to be part of this world?" she asked softly, not looking at me. Not as a visitor. Not for headlines. For real. I didn't answer. I couldn't, not yet. Because being part of her world meant leaving behind the one I'd spent my whole life protecting. And that kind of honesty? That was more terrifying than love. I should have expected it. My mother doesn't lose battles, she reroutes them. A week after the wedding fallout, I got a call from my cousin saying he overheard her in a salon in Ikoyi spinning the story. Amara had planned everything. The pregnancy? A trap. The cleaning job? Staged. The wedding crash? A perfectly timed act to humiliate the Maduka name. I laughed bitterly when I heard it, not because it was funny, but because it was familiar. My mother doesn't just rewrite history, she weaponizes it. That same day, Amara called me, her voice shaking with rage. A man came to my building, said he was with a private housing trust, asking questions about my rent history. Then he offered me money, said it was for relocation assistance. I didn't need a crystal ball. It was my mother. She wanted Amara gone, again. Not just out of my life, but off the map entirely. I told him to get out, Amara added. And I swear, Ken, if you sent him... I didn't, I said quickly. I swear. But I'll handle it. I hung up and marched straight to the house in Banana Island like I was walking into a fire. She was seated in her usual armchair, sipping Zobo from a glass with no ice, just the way she liked it. Her lace wrapper shimmered under the chandelier, but her face gave nothing away. "I heard you've been visiting your ex," she said, without looking up. "Quite the reversal, isn't it?" I ignored the bait. "Why did you send someone to her flat?" Her lips twitched. "You're blaming me for trying to clean up your mistake." I stood still, fists clenched. "You don't get to fix this with hush money or humiliation. She's not a stain to be scrubbed out of your guest list. She's carrying a child, Mom. Possibly mine." That got her attention. Her face hardened. "And you're willing to throw away your legacy over a maybe?" "No," I said, my voice steady. "I'm throwing away the version of me you built. Because that version of me watched a woman suffer in silence and called it strength." She didn't respond. Maybe because she knew it was true. I turned to leave, but paused at the door. "This is the last time you interfere. If you touch her again, you lose me." It wasn't a threat. It was a declaration. And for once, she had no script to counter it. We sat across from each other at the clinic, Amara in a soft navy dress, me in jeans and a t-shirt for once, stripped of ego and ceremony. I'd asked her gently, again, if we could do a paternity test. Not for scandal. Not for control. Just for clarity. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "I'll do it. But not for you. For the child." That humbled me more than I expected. The process was clinical, swift, painfully impersonal. A cheek swab. A few signatures. Then the silence. "You think the result changes anything?" she asked as we waited in the reception. "Whether it's yours or not." I shook my head. "Not anymore. I need to stop living in assumption." She looked away, a sad smile tugging at her mouth. "That's what you've always done. Assumed I'd wait. Assumed I'd be fine. Assumed your silence was love." I swallowed hard. "I know. I'm trying to unlearn that." The truth is, in that moment, I didn't care what the test said. I had already decided to show up for the child, for her healing, for myself. Sometimes DNA isn't the truth you need. Sometimes the truth is in who stays. The days waiting for the result were some of the longest of my life. Not because I feared the outcome, but because I feared what I'd do with it. If the child wasn't mine, would I retreat into comfort? Would I stop fighting? I stayed close, drove her to doctor appointments, brought food without being asked, kept my distance when she needed it. It was Amara who said it first. "You've changed," she murmured as we walked through Balaga Market one humid afternoon. Picking baby clothes she insisted on buying used. "You're quieter, less performative." I smiled. Maybe I got tired of pretending. She stopped by a small roadside stall, examining a blanket with cartoon elephants. "You think this makes up for everything?" she asked, not harshly. I shook my head. "Nothing makes up for everything. But I can show up every day like I'm trying." She nodded slowly. That was enough, for now. We weren't together. There were no kisses. No hopeful promises. Just two people walking side by side in the chaos of Lagos, trying to unlearn the parts of love that hurt. Trust didn't come back with a grand gesture. It came with groceries delivered without a reminder. With me showing up for her blood tests at 7 a.m. sharp. With sitting in silence as she cried watching an ultrasound monitor. With no cameras. No audience. Just presence. One evening, after her prenatal class, we sat on a concrete bench outside the center. The rain had just stopped, and the Lagos night smelled of pepper soup and wet cement. "He used to hold things in," she said softly, not looking at me. "Everything. Even love. It made me feel like I was always guessing." I exhaled. I was taught that vulnerability is weakness. That men lead with their chest, not their chest beating. She chuckled. "So you led with silence." I nodded. "And it cost me everything." She reached over and touched my wrist gently. "Maybe not everything. Some things are still here. Just in new shape." That was the closest we'd come to forgiveness. No declarations. No rewinds. Just the small miracle of shared space and slow repair. As weeks passed, we found a rhythm. I became familiar with the rickety gates of her compound, the security man who always scowled at me until I greeted first, the neighbor's toddler who always offered me biscuit crumbs. Her world was humble, but it was real, and I respected it deeply. We took walks, not romantic, just necessary. We talked about baby names. I told her about my first childhood memory. She told me about her first heartbreak. That wasn't me. It was beautiful in a quiet, uncertain way. One night, as we ate Ava Goin from a street vendor near Ojulegba, she looked up and said, "If this child isn't yours, will you still be here?" I didn't hesitate. Yes. She stared at me like she wanted to believe me. "Why?" she asked. I looked at her belly. "Because I'm finally the kind of man who deserves to be." And for the first time, I saw a flicker of something return to her eyes, something softer than trust, but braver than doubt. The envelope came in a plain brown folder, no drama, no italics. Just two names, a percentage, and the finality of science. I opened it in my apartment, alone. I don't even know why I didn't wait for Amara. Maybe because I knew this wasn't about what the paper said. It was about what I'd already chosen. The result? 99.9%. Mine. The breath I didn't know I was holding escaped in a strange, tangled laugh. Relief, fear, gratitude. all of it tangled into one tight knot in my chest. I sat there for a while, just staring at the paper. I wasn't crying. I wasn't dancing. I was thinking of the man I used to be, the one who would have read this and felt entitled to something. Now, I felt responsible, fully, wholly, without condition. That night, I drove to Amara's flat. She opened the door, took one look at my face, and didn't ask for the paper. She just stepped aside and let me in. We sat at the edge of her bed, knees touching, and said nothing. Sometimes silence can mean freedom. I knew it, she said after a while. Not in a scientific way. Just a mother's knowing. I nodded, but I needed to know it in my bones. She turned to me. What now? I didn't have a proposal or a grand plan. I just said, now I protect you. Both of you. In public. In private. Loudly. Quietly. And I meant it. The next week, I did exactly that. When my mother called again, threatening to reclaim our name, I told her she'd already lost something more valuable. My respect. I released a quiet statement to the press, taking full responsibility for the wedding collapse, clearing Amara's name, and asking for privacy. I didn't mention the child. That was her story to share, if and when she chose. And Lagos? It moved on. It always does. Scandals fade faster than love stories. But for once, I wasn't chasing redemption through noise. I was building peace through consistency. And as I walked into Amara's flat one evening, with a small pink onesie and a packet of groundnut soup, she smiled, not because I bought something, but because I showed up. Again, there was no proposal, no surprise engagement party, no violin quartet in a fancy restaurant. Just a Tuesday evening, the rain falling in steady rhythm, and me standing in her kitchen while she stirred ogbono soup with slow, practiced grace. You've been quiet, she said. You're always quiet before something serious. I smiled, walked over, and took the ladle from her hand. Let me. She stepped aside and watched me stir. After a long pause, I said, I want to be in this with you. Not as penance. Not as apology. Just as me. She said nothing, so I continued. I'm not asking for marriage today. I'm asking for space beside you. To raise this child. To unlearn my damage. To earn back trust with consistency, not grand gestures. When she finally spoke, it was soft. I don't know if I can love you again, Ken. Not the same way. I nodded. I'm not asking for the same. I'm asking for better. She looked down at the soup, then at me. Then we'll start with dinner, and the rest we build slowly. When the baby came, a girl with Amara's sharp eyes and my stubborn chin, it was like the city paused just long enough for breath. We named her Kenechukwu, what God has written, because her life had rewritten mine. I held her in the delivery room with trembling hands, not as a billionaire, not as a man trying to prove himself, but as a father whose past no longer defined his future. Amara slept afterward, exhausted, peaceful. I sat beside her, watching both of them, overwhelmed by something too big for words. And I realized in that stillness that love isn't always a firework. Sometimes it's a slow matchstick glow, persistent, patient, unflinching. The kind that survives storms. The kind that builds homes without marble floors. We didn't go back to how things were. We moved forward, brick by brick, moment by moment. And every day, I woke up choosing her. Choosing the truth. Choosing to stay. Not because I had to, but because I finally became a man who knew what staying meant.